Ladies and gentlemen, chess enthusiasts of all ages, step right up and strap yourselves in for one of the most electrifying chess rides in history. Today, we're diving ourselves into a match that was nothing but ordinary. Welcome to the roller coaster review of Caruana versus Nepo at the 2024 FIDE Candidates. In one corner, we had Caruana, the second highest ranked player in the world. A chess titan who managed to make some jaw-dropping moves, as well as some heartbreaking blunders, all in the same match. Was it the high stakes? Was it the pressure? Or maybe it was just an off day at the park? We'll dive into that mystery. You see, in the world of grandmaster chess, things usually proceed in a very predictable and steady fashion, like a calm train ride through the countryside. Don't believe me? Here are the graphs for the matches that ended up with a winner. You can clearly see that they develop steadily, and once someone gets an upper hand, they seize the opportunity and build upon it till the end. And here are the graphs of the matches that ended up in a draw. Just as one would expect, it's a balanced battle with no clear advantage to either side. And it stays this way all the way to the uneventful end. But not this time, folks. This match, it was like a roller coaster designed by a mad engineer. So buckle up. I'm Jon Jon, and I'll be your host to this crazy ride. So here's my bold statement. The feel for this roller coaster is that not only Caruana but both players got cold feet. And I got some stats to share with you as to why I think this is the case. These guys are the best players in the world, and they're not supposed to be riding this kind of ride. As I mentioned, Caruana is the second highest rated player by FIDE, and alongside with Magnus, both of them are the only players rated above 2800. He's been playing the candidates since 2016, and he even won the 2018 edition. And after this win in 2018 in the World Championship tournament against the GOAT Magnus, they played 12 classical games against each other, and they drew all of them. Caruana only lost after they started playing rapid games as a tiebreaker. After getting so close to becoming the Super Mega Blaster World Champion, he continued qualifying to all other candidates from then on. Nepo is not far behind. Get this, he qualified 2 times before to the candidates and won both times. This is out of this world. This guy had 100% efficiency at the candidates tournament. The bittersweet part of his history, though, is that on his first attempt at the World Championship, Magnus got a clear upper hand against him. And on his second attempt, this time against Loren, it was a very close call. So this match that we're about to see was key for Nepo to have a ticket for the rematch against Loren. So let me set the stage. This was the last round of the candidates. Gukesh had just secured 9 points by drawing against Nakamura. Both Caruana and Nepo were tied with 8 points each. Winning was a must for both of them. The worst scenario? A draw. That's because a draw would mean crowning Gukesh the champion. The stakes were high, getting so close to the possibility of writing their names in chess history. And all the ups and downs of this match makes me think that they got cold feet. So ladies and gentlemen, hold on tight as we loop through this thrilling chess ride. Caruana starts with d4, and it quickly transposed to a Queen's Gambit decline setup. An early trade on the center, and now these 2 knights here look very juicy targets for a pin, and both players decide to pin them. E3 now by Caruana does a few things, consolidates the center pawn and opens up for the white square bishop, but at the same time, kinda blocks the black square bishop out of the structure. Nepo sees this, doesn't think twice, and starts harassing the bishop with his pawns. And now knight to e4 is a very clever move, adding pressure to the knight on c3, but at the same time attempting to break the bishop pair from Caruana. Do you know how in every roller coaster there's that initial moment that was like soothing and calm and riding along, and then there's that moment where you start hearing that clicking metal sound? This is what's happening right now. We're just in the opening phases of the match, and we're building for the ride to come. The 2 attackers on the knight is the bigger threat here, so Caruana puts his queen on c2. h5 is forcing Caruana to do something about his bishop. So he decides to challenge the knight. He's basically saying, okay, you can break my bishop pair, but at least I will open a file for my rook and then I will castle queenside. Bishop to e6 develops, and Caruana develops his bishop, while Nepo decides to consolidate his center pawn with c6. As expected, because of Nepo's advanced pawns and his own double pawns on the g-file, Caruana castles queenside, and Nepo finishes his development. f4 is a natural move, trying to undouble the pawns. Nepo ignores, bishop g4 targets the rook. Knight f3 completes development while blocking the bishop, and Nepo with queen e7 aims for the loose pawn on e3. But a push solves everything, because now the pawn has too many defenders. Nepo decides that taking the knight is a solid move here, removing one of the defenders of the e4 pawn. but the pawn still has a hidden defense. Taking on e4 does look like a fork, but after the bishop takes back, Nepo can't do anything about it. If he dares to take, it's game over with a nasty pin to the queen. Of course, Nepo didn't fall for this. Like, I would fall for a crappy tactic like this, but not Nepo. Instead, he sees that if he starts trading everything in the center, he might just be able to create a passed pawn. Caruana now decides to push instead of taking back, because if he does that, he will end up with double pawns again. Nepo castles queenside, and Caruana goes with d5, which is a great move. Nepo's pawn on c6 is spinned and overloaded with attackers. So now Nepo's thinking, shit's gonna hit the fan, I better do something quick. So he goes for the counterplay and pushes the h pawn, making it a pass pawn, the first one in the game. So far, we've been slowly going up a roller coaster, but from now on, things will start getting wild. h4 does create a pass pawn, but that doesn't address the bomb that is about to go off on the c-file. Caruana is at 1.3 points of advantage now. D takes on c6. He goes for the obvious, and Nepo finds the very counterintuitive knight to c5. It's the best move. The knight is guarded by the queen and blocks any discovered checks that will come by. Check with the bishop on f5, and Nepo slides to the b file, as so does Caruana, avoiding any silly checks on e3. So now Nepo decides to address the pawn on the c file by pushing his pawn ahead. Maybe he thought, hey, I'll stabilize my knight, and now it will be pretty hard for Caruana to defend the c pawn. But what he should have done instead is dried up the board a bit and make the e-file his new home. Caruana has now 2.6 points of advantage. That's almost a full piece, but he misses the opportunity. Rook d7, and he wants to push the pawn even more. Now Nepo trades the rook, and the pawn is one square away from promotion. But not for long. There's just too many pieces attacking that poor little guy. The queen joins the attack, but the pawn falls anyways. Rook d1, and it seems that the knight will fall. It is 3 attackers on 2 defenders, but Nepo goes queen c5. That is such a brilliant defensive move. It does look like the knight is hanging because it was short on defenders and Nepo just removed one of them. But you can't take with the queen since it's too valuable. So you start with the bishop. But then Nepo will take your queen, and after you recapture it, you've lost all of your advantage. The bishop is pinned and the h-pawn is too close from promotion. Caruana sees all of this and instead captures a loose pawn with a check. Nepo covers with his queen, and he really wants to trade queens right now. Caruana slides the queen back to the d-file to add pressure, and Nepo moves his pawn. That little one is getting too close. Bishop e4 is a great move. It adds threats to the unprotected white square near Nepo's king, and at the same time guards the long diagonal against the future promotion of the pawn. We've been stuck in Caruana's 2 points of advantage for too long now. It's time to go higher. Nepo goes a5, and now Fishy says that Caruana has more than a full piece of advantage worth of points. And Caruana finds the best move, queen to d5. This is actually a fork on the pawn, because there is a threat of checkmate on the a8 square, and needs to be handled. Nepo dodges the checkmate with king a7, as this adds a defender on the a8 square. Caruana picks up the pawn, so Nepo says, okay, cool, you'll take my pawn and I'll push mine. It's now Nepo's turn to be one square away from promotion. Now we know that Caruana has a huge lead of over 3 points here, but they don't, especially Caruana himself. It surely doesn't feel like a huge advantage when your opponent's so close to a promotion and his king is safe. Caruana prepares to capture that sneaky pawn. The king comes back to a safer square. a3 gives a bit of breathing room to the king, and Nepo brings his queen to a central square. It does look like the knight is hanging again, but Caruana can't actually capture it. That's because after they trade on d7, Nepo will promote his pawn to a queen with a check first. There's no way to defend against that, so the king is forced to move to b2, and Nepo will end up with 2 queens on the board. Queen h2 is the best move here, trying to infiltrate the queen to the c6 square. Nepo had to defend everything, moving his queen back to c7. Caruana pushes his pawn, the rook comes to defend. Since Nepo moved his rook, Caruana can finally move his, and now threatens to capture the pawn on h2. Nepo responds with the attack on a bishop. We're high up in a roller coaster, and it's time for our first step. Bishop h7 skips the attack from the knight and attacks the rook. But this is a mistake. This allows Nepo to trade his rook for a pawn and a bishop, since the final capture is his queen with a check. And now king a1? Oh my god, the advantage is all gone. Nepo can now infiltrate his queen while keep the defense on the h2 pawn. This is insane. But Nepo's king is naked, a check. The king escapes. Caruana finally moved his king to the better square, but now a4 traps the king in a corner of the board. Caruana starts pushing another pawn, and knight b3. Oh my god, that is another mistake from Nepo. We're back to almost 2 points to Caruana. Nepo should have protected his king instead, because now white can move his queen twice and bring it as a defender. Nepo harasses the lonely rook. He needs to promote his pawn. Caruana checks and brings his rook to the e-file. Wait, what? The e-file? Doesn't that allow Nepo to promote his pawn? Not really, because this time, if he promotes, it does without a check. And then Caruana has a forced checkmate with the rook to e7, king b8, queen c7, king a8, and checkmate with the queen a7. But Nepo doesn't fall for that. He can block that crazy line with his knight. That was the best defense. Caruana wants to trade queens. Nepo says no. King a1, and Nepo makes another mistake with queen c2. He should have moved his king away from any check lines, and you'll see why in a second. Caruana pushes. Nepo threatens checkmate on b2. The rook defends, and the knight comes back. Another push. This is getting extreme. The knight checks, king a2, and Nepo finds a fork on the queen and the rook. But remember when we said that Nepo should have moved his king away from check lines? Now Caruana can escape the fork with a check, and he kicks the queen away, who then goes back to attack that loose pawn. But Caruana still has a very healthy advantage, and he goes rook c7 check. Wait, what? That is a blunder. The advantage goes all away. The king hides, the pawn is pushed, and is now one square away from promotion. But Nepo has the check with the knight up his sleeve, king to b1. But here's the tricky part. He can only guarantee the draw if he finds this alien variation. A check with the knight, the king comes out, then he sacrifices the knight, do a couple of checks with the queen, just to capture the rook back with a check, giving him a tempo to also capture the pawn on f7. This is crazy, and that would end up with a queen endgame that is basically a draw. And you guessed it, he does not see that variation. Instead, he goes for a queen check, and what a blunder. Bishop now gives Caruana a 5-point lead. 5 points, that's kind of like a full rook. The king escapes once again to a2, and this gives Caruana the chance to lock the match. Check with the queen, king hides on b5, check again, king back to a6, again the queen on a8. There's a perpetual check here, but Caruana is too far ahead. He doesn't want the draw. But he repeats. Oh my god, he was 5 points ahead and he fumbles. What he should have done instead is go for the check on e8. And after another move from the king, he would not promote the pawn, because that would be a huge blunder giving a force mate to Nepo. Let me know in the comments below if you can find the force mate for Nepo if Caruana promotes his pawn. Instead of promoting, he checks from e2 and finally snatches the loose pawn on h2. But none of that happens. He repeats his queen check on c6, and his whole 5-point advantage goes away as the king once more escapes to c6. He brings his rook to try to stop the pawn. Nepo goes back to defend. Caruana desperately repeats queen checks, but now the check from e8 is harmless because the rook is blocking the queen, and Nepo has a defender on the e2 square. Caruana still finds the nice idea of sacrificing the rook for a pawn and the knight, giving him an extra pawn on his endgame. But after a bunch of checks and the clearance of the advanced pawns, both players find themselves in this queen endgame that is vastly known for being a draw. Both players really needed a win, so they will go on with an endless dance of pieces and checks, hoping that one of them will make one more mistake. But that doesn't happen, and they agree to a bitter draw. What a crazy match! Caruana had the win on his hands at least a couple times and he let it slip. This is all history, it's needless to say, but this crazy match was the preamble that culminated in Gukash's 2024 Candidates Championship. This was the cherry on top of his brilliant campaign, despite the fall in the 7th round against Perugia. So if you want to take a deep dive into the 2 games that changed chess history and also understand the superpower that Gukash has, check out this video where we go through all of this. So that's it folks, I'll see you on our next ride. I'll see you on our... Não, tem que ser mais fácil que preamble, cara, não é possível. Preamble culminated.